As in previous video, we learned about what is a hook and what is the difference between the state of a class and state of a hook. We also discussed about the features of the hook, what are different rules you should follow, and things like that. In this video, we're going to specifically focus on state hooks. So we discussed there are different types of hooks. The two major ones are state hook and effect hook. So in this video, we're going to talk about state hook, and we're going to use the useState, which is a state hook, to develop a to-do app. And I'm going to keep it really simple so it's easy for you to understand. So let's begin then. There's a repository already available on Git, which is at imranhsayed / react-hooks. You can go onto that, and you can, once this is done, you can check out to this branch, which is to-do app, and you will get all of the codes there. But if you want to code along with me, you can. I have a basic setup of React with using WEBPACK and Babel. If you have a different setup, you can use that, or you can use mine. It's up to you. Okay, so let's begin now. I'm going to go ahead and create a component inside of my components directory, and I'm going to name it as todo.js. I'm going to go ahead and import React from React. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and create, I have habit of creating a class component, but now since it's hook, we can use functional components. So I'll just say const todo is equal to, you're so accustomed of creating class components, it's gonna take some time to get away with that habit. Export default todo. Okay, and then we can just import it inside of our app component. I can get rid of this home, we don't need it for now. I'll just say todo, and React has already imported it on top, so that's fine. Okay, so, and as you know, a functional component just need to return. We know that we don't use render in the functional component because the whole component, consider the whole component as render. Okay, so okay, let's get rid of this. Okay, this is to do. Okay, now the first thing we need to do is basically initialize the state for the hook, and we need to pull useState, which is a state hook. Let's make it, I'm going to name it as initial state. And since we're going to make some to-dos, let's define some to-dos already, and let's keep it an array because it's going to be a list of items. So the first item will contain some text. We can say learn hooks, and it's going to contain is completed. Initially we'll set to false because once we set that to true, that means it is completed. Okay, so the second task can be get JS book. You can write whatever you want, but just naming it like that. Get the JavaScript book, and this one can be learn JavaScript. Okay, so you've got that. So we've initialized, we've actually created a constant in which we are going to store the initial state, and then all I have to do is just call this function useState and then pass the initial state inside of it. So I'm going to make it simple for you to understand. So let me tell you what happens. When you call setState, what's going to happen is it's going to take the initial state and it's going to return an array of two items. First is going to be a state variable, which it will create, and second is the function that you can use to set the state. How you used to do this dot set state in a class component. So basically that function will do the same job. So I'm going to say const result array. Okay, so it's going to give you an array. The first one you can name it as let's say what should we name it as? To-dos is equal to result array, because is going to be the first item. So result array 0th element, right? The first item will be to do, so it's going to create a state variable to do, and whose initial value will be equal to initial state. Later on, its value is going to be the current state, but for now, when the components renders for the first time, it's going to be equal to initial state. The second one is going to be a function. So we can call this function new to do's. Okay. So in fact, so not new to do, set to do. Okay, and like I said, it returns array of 2 elements. First is the state variable whose value is equal to initial state, and second will be the function that allows you to set the new state. Okay, so it's going to be the second item, which is index number 1. Okay, now of course these are 3 lines of code. We can simplify this using array destructuring. So we have been using object destructuring earlier, but now we can use array destructuring. So to use array destructuring, all you have to do is you can simplify this code by saying const and take this item and take this one here and just use this. This is same as what we have written here. So it's basically pulling out to-dos, the first element from the array that it returns, and assigning that as to-dos, and the second item is pulling out and setting that as set to-dos. These names can be chosen by you. It is not hard and fast rule that you have to use the same thing. It's a custom name. You can use it what you want. Similarly, for initial state, you can choose the name that you want. Okay, it's up to you. So let's get rid of this. I put it that way to explain to you how this destructuring works. Okay, great. Now what we're going to do is we will give it a class name of to-do container, and inside of this I'm going to just say h2, so just put the heading and we'll say to-do app, and we're going to just put a class name over here and we'll give it a class name of main heading, and then we're going to loop through each item of the array. So say div, and inside of this we can check. Now earlier we had to pull things out of the state. We already done that over here, so we can directly use to do. We don't have to use like this dot state dot to do because it's already pulled out from the state. Okay, so to do dot length, because it's an array, so we're going to check if it has the item. We don't need to check it because we already initialized this, but as best practice I'm using that. Okay, and then it's going to go ahead and check that information. If it has items, then give me everything or just don't return anything. Okay, and over here I can do to-dos. I can use map function to map through each item of the array, and I can say item, and then I will need the index also, so I can put it in a bracket, item index. Okay, and we'll return the elements over here. Okay, and I think it'll be better to keep these items inside of a separate component, makes it a lot easier. Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll create another component and keep it as item.js. Okay, so item is going to be a functional component, so we'll just say import react from react, and we'll just say const item is equal to, it's going to take some props, so it's going to take the item, or we call it to do, and it's going to take index, and we can we have always done like props over here, then we used to access it like props dot to do props dot index. But instead of doing that, you can just put it like inside of an object like this. Okay, and then you don't have to do props dot to do and props dot index. You can directly use like to do over here inside of this function. Okay, so now so you'll say div and you give it a class name of to do, and we can put this inside of a span. Okay, and let's give it a class name. I'm used to PHP Storm, that's why I'm struggling with VS Code editor. I've just downloaded it today. People have been suggesting me to use it, so I want to try it out. Okay, great. So we'll give this class name later. Let's just keep it that way, and you can just say to do dot text, because remember that we're going to get the to do inside of this, and to do dot text will be equal to this. Okay, and that's about it for now. I think we can just export this item. So export default item. Okay, and then we can just import it here. So item like this, closing tag, and we can pass to do this item, and we can pass index as index. Okay, so let's see what we get. We just need to start the server. I'm not sure if I have already. So I'll say npm run dev is going to start my webpack dev server at port 8080. So let's open that up. Okay. We also need to add a key over here, because when we loop through an item, we need to add a key. And of course, this cannot be unique. Someone might put these two as same. I don't know why they would, but they might. So let's see what do we have unique. Index, again, we should not use index idly, because if you are looping through multiple items, then index can be the same if you have multiple arrays. So then we can combine these two. We can combine the text as well as the index. Okay, so what we can do is we can use a backtick over here, and I'm gonna say item dot text. So item dot text, and then put a dash over here, and then just pass index over here. So it's just gonna do a combination. So like learn hooks dash 1 or 0, whatever the index is. Okay, so let's just check if that works. We have got some error. Let me just check what's happening. Okay, I guess I just had to refresh the page, so it's working. I've added some style, and I'm not going to go through what styles I've added, because this is not for learning styles sheets, but this is for learning hooks. Okay, so you can see now that if I just go to React, and then if I go to my to-do component, okay, you can see that we have the state, we have 3 arrays, we have all of these items over here. Okay, and if I have to console it, it's already been consoled. So if I go over here and check, you can see this is the 3 items. The first item in the array is text, is completed is false, get the JS book, and all of that. So we are looping through each item of the array over here, and then using another component item to render the text inside of it. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is basically create a form so that we can add more tasks into the list. Okay, so let's do that. So what I'm going to do is basically create a form. So I'm going to create a component over here, and I'm going to name it as todo form.js. So this form will be responsible for adding new tasks into the list. So let's do that. Import React from React, and then what I'm going to do is say const todo form is equal to, and it's going to take some props for that. For now I'll just leave it. Okay, and it's just going to go ahead and render the form. Oh, okay, so over here we're just going to say form. We can add an event over here which is for on submit. We'll add it in a moment. Let's create a label. Let's give it a class name. I'm using form label as a class name, and then I'm going to say add task, and then I'll say input, and input needs to have a closing tag, and since I'm going to add multiple attributes, I'm going to break that into multiple lines. I'll say type is equal to text, class name is equal to form input, and then placeholder will be enter new task, enter new task, and then value is going to be, for now I'll leave it empty. I'm going to add this in a moment. Okay, and then we need to add an on change event. So on change event. Okay, so when we do an on change, we need to define a function over here. Okay, and we can say that function name will be handle on change. Okay, and it's going to take event as its parameter, and the job of this will be to basically set an item. Okay, so instead of doing a set item over here, we have a set item available right here. Okay, so sorry, the set value, we have a set value available. Okay, so let's see how we can use that. In fact, we should name this as AdToDo, because the job of this will be to AdToDo. Okay, and then I can pass this to the form. So I'm just going to go ahead and export this form so I can import it there. So export default todo form. Okay, and I'm going to import that here. Say form todo form, right? That, and I'm going to pass this method AdToDo. So AdToDo is equal to AdToDo. Okay, now this will be available here, AdToDo. I guess the spelling is correct, like that. Okay, and then for this particular component, we need to also define a state for basically on change. Okay, so we're going to call a function useState. Of course, we have to pull it on top first. So useState, and then we're going to say useState, and then pass in an empty value for now, because what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set the value of this input element of whatever the user enters, we're going to set the value in the state. So this going, like I said, this is going to return an array of 2 items. One will be the state variable, so let's name it as value because that's the input value. Okay, and initially the value of the this state variable is going to be nothing, it will be blank empty string. Okay, and then it's going to give me a function which will allow me to set the value of this. So I can just say set value, I can name it whatever I want, so set value, and inside of this I can just do set value and event dot target dot value, because event dot target dot value will contain this, and then I can use the same value that I have it available in the state, so I can just say value over here. Okay, so and then we can pass in this function. We don't have, remember, we don't have to use this because we are not dealing with the class, so it saves our job of unnecessary binding in case if you're using a function, normal function rather than the arrow function. Okay, so we've got that taken care of. Okay, and then we need to handle the form submit. Okay, so we'll go ahead and create a function for this as well. So I'm going to create it on top right here. I'll say on form submit. Okay, and then first thing we're going to do event dot prevent default to prevent the default functionality of the form, and then we're going to check if there is a value or not. If there's a value, if there's no value, which means user not entered anything, don't do anything, which means just return. Okay, and if the user has entered a value, then all I'm going to do is just call AdToDo method, which is the method that belongs to todo. And as we already know that if we pass a value inside of this function, then it's going to set that value to the current state of todo. Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll say AdToDo will be value. Okay, in fact this is going to be set to do only. We have to create a different function for that, set to do, and add to do const, because we cannot directly set the value over here because this is an array, so we have to apply some logic here, right? So we can say const new to do is equal to, what we can do is we can first pass whatever the all of this value is, the current state value of to-dos is, and then we can just add our new element over there. Okay, so I can just say so this is going to take text and we can just pass it like that, and then call set to do new to dos. Okay, so let me explain to you what's happening over here. Okay, so we've created a function AdToDo. Okay, it's going to take a parameter which is text. We're going to pass this AdToDo to the form, so it gets passed as props right here, and then whenever the form is submitted, we're going to call this function and pass whatever the value user has entered in the form in the input field. Okay, so once this function is called with whatever value the user has entered into the input, then what we're going to do is we'll create a new constant, new to-dos. We're going to take whatever the value of the state is inside of this to-dos, whatever these items are, and plus we're going to add the new value to it. So it's going to be appended, so whatever the current value is, and then comma whatever the new value is. Okay, so it's going to be appended there, and then we're going to call the set to do function. So once we have the new array of elements, which is basically the old items plus the new one, then it's just going to set the new value of to-dos to all of this, to the new items plus the old items. Okay, so that's basically what's happening here. So let's check that if that actually works. So I think we've missed this on form submit. We just need to add that here. Okay, and this will be a return and not render. I've got habit of writing render because I've been using class. Okay, so now if I check, I have this form available and I can just say new item. Again, AdToDo is not a function. Let's see what we have missed. AdToDo, it's not a function. Why isn't it a function? Okay, we need to put it like this. That's why. We could have done props and then props.AdToDo, but if we use it like this instead of an object, we can pull AdToDo out of the props like this. Okay, so let's try that. New task. You can see new task is added. Awesome. Another task. Awesome. Another task is added as well. Great. Awesome. So let me give you a recap of what's happening over here. So we created a to-do component, and inside of this we define an initial state, which is basically an array of items which takes text and then is completed to false. We are setting it by default, which you're going to use it in some time. Then we call the useState hook, and this takes the initial state, which is the data that we've just added here, and then it returns two items in form of an array. First is it creates the state variable to do, which will be equal to the initial state, which is this value first of all, and then whenever the set to do function is called with the new items, then the value of the to-dos will be equal to whatever is passed inside of the set to do. Okay, so now at this point what we are doing is we are going ahead and looping through each item of the array which is available inside of the to do. Okay, and we are going ahead and using this item, which is another component basically right here. Okay, and the job of this is basically just to render all the items. Okay, and then over here we have created a form and we have imported this form. Basically we have created a form like this. Inside of this form we are using another state, useState basically, and we are creating a state value for the initial state, setting it to empty. Then there's a method available to set the value of the new state. Okay, and then over here this is the form, this is the input element. We have an on change event. The job of this is to call the set value method and set the value of the current state to whatever the user has entered. So event.target.value will contain the value of whatever the user has entered, and this method is basically setting the current state value to the new value. Okay, so the value will become to whatever the user has entered. Then when the form is submitted, we are checking if the user has entered something, which means if value contains anything. So if he's entered, this will already contain whatever he's entered because we are setting it here. And then we are calling the AdToDo method. AdToDo method is being passed from its parent component, which is here, and the job of AdToDo is basically to take whatever you give it. So what we are giving right here is whatever the user has entered into the input field. Okay, and then we are calling the setToDo method, the job of which is to basically set the new value of to-dos. So we are taking a constant over here. We are taking whatever this current value of the state is, which is this, not this, basically whatever the current value is, and then we are adding our value to it. Okay, like this. So that's how it's able to go ahead and append each item. So if you want to see that in action, new task, hit enter. See, now we have 4 items. So these were the previous one and one more has been added. Why? Because over here we are saying that new to do will contain whatever the current value of the state is, and go ahead and add another one which user has given us, okay, which is this basically. Now I think we also need to add is completed to false over there. Okay, so I think this should be, yes. So what we can do is we can pass it like this. We can say text is equal to value and then is completed is equal to false. And over here we can say text is equal to text and then is completed false. We can either pass it from there or we can initially set it to false, whichever works for you. I mean, I think it'll be better just passed value over here only, and over here we can do like this, okay. And in ES6, if the property name and property value is the same, then we can just say text over here. That's not a problem. Okay, so let's try that now. New task. Of course we are not saving that in the memory and all, but that's okay. So now it's, you can see you've got is completed also, so I think it was important. Great. Next thing we need to do, I hope you've understood this, guys. So next thing we need to do is basically go ahead and add a cross button over here, so that when the user clicks on that, we can add a strike through, and we can also remove an element, so we can take care of that. So the first thing we're going to do is basically inside of our item component, which is here, we're going to add a cross button, okay. So let's do that. Where do we add it? Here. Yeah, so we can say span. We can give it a class name of remove item cross sorry, and then we can just put like this, sorry, over here, and we can add an event listener. So on click, and inside of that I will pass a function because I need to pass a parameter, handle remove click, and we can pass an index because we're getting index from top, okay, so that I know which item it is. Okay, so we can pass that there, okay. And now this handle remove click, let's not handle it here, we need to handle it inside of its parent. So let's go to its parent and let's create a function event it's not going to take event, it's take index because you're passing index, remember, from here. Where is it gone? This one, we're passing index. Okay, so what we can do is we'll first get all to-dos array from the state, and we know that current state value is to-dos, right? So current state is to-dos, that contains the current state value. So we can say new to-dos is equal to, so we can use object, we can use spread operator to get all the values inside of this array. So whatever the current value of this to-dos is, we're going to get all of that value here, okay. And then we can say remove the click item from the array, okay. So remove the clicked item from the to-dos array. So this array we need to remove the clicked item, okay. So all we have to do is we can just use a JavaScript function. So we can say new to-dos dot splice, we can use a splice method, and we can say index and then comma 1. Okay, so go ahead and get the index, which means get that item, and remove that item, so one item, okay. So out of that, so it's going to remove that, and then we need to go, so once we get this new array basically, Okay, we need to set our new value of to-dos to the new array. So set state with the new array of in to-dos with the updated value. So over here we can say set to-dos because we have that method available. This hook provides us this method, and we can just pass the new value that we want to assign to the current state to do. Okay, so we can just say new to-dos. So now if I go ahead and check, awesome. So we have this cross button available. I can click on this. Do we have an error? Let's see, what error do we have? Handle remove click is not a function. Okay, the reason for this is because we've not passed into the to-dos form. So guys, as a developer, you know that 80% of our job is to fix errors. You must have seen this in building this application. I have come across different errors, but the thing is that with experience you learn how to fix the errors. Now I could fix it immediately is because I've been developing, and with time your mind develops, and your mind actually tells you where the problem is. Okay, so we can say handle remove click, and we can pass it here, and now not here actually, sorry, it's inside of the item. So now this item can consume it. So we've already imported that here, and we pass it. So I hope that works now. Let's refresh, click again. Okay, it's not a function. Is it not passed properly? Handle remove click, let's see. What's the issue? Okay, the page just had to be refreshed, that's all. Okay, so now you can see you can get rid of the items. You can add a new item, new task, click on it, it goes away. Okay, so if you want to see that in action, you can do a console log over here and check the value of to-dos. So basically every time the state changes, your component gets re-rendered. Okay, this function that you see, you can consider that as a render method for this functional component. So it gets re-rendered every time the state changes. So if I go over here and check, currently there are 3 items. If I click on it, you can see now it's 2. Yep. Awesome. Now the last thing we need to do is basically add a strike through in case if the user wants to click on this item, there should be a strike through. So for that, we can create a method. Okay, and we can name it as const handle item click, and it's going to take index. First thing, same thing we have to do over here as well, get all the to-do arrays from the state. Okay, and then the next thing we need to do is do a set is completed, set the is completed to true for that particular element. Okay, so we can say set is completed property to reverse of what its current value is. Why we are saying reverse is because if the user clicks on this, it should be strike through. If he again clicks on it, it should be unstrike through. I don't know if there's a word called unstrike through, but it should undo that basically. Okay, now we're going to say new to-dos, which, so we've got all the to-dos, the current value of all the to-dos from the array, and we've got created an array for that, and then we get hold of that particular element, so we can pass an index here. Okay, and we can say dot is completed to not new to-dos index dot is completed. So basically what this is doing is that it is getting hold of that element which has been clicked by its index and setting its value of is completed property to reverse of whatever its current value is. So if it's false, set it to true. If it's true, it will set it to false. And by this value, we are going to probably add a class that helps us toggle between the class, and that class will actually apply the strike through and change the color. Okay, and now all we have to do is just, we've got the updated items, the current value, the new state value basically, and all we have to do is just make use of the same method. So you can see how simple this becomes, because we don't have to do like this dot set state each time. So we can just use this and just add the new to dos over here, and that takes care of the problem. And then we can pass this function inside of the item. And we can consume it inside of the item. And here we just need to toggle the class. So if the value is true, then we'll add a class, otherwise we won't. So let's see what we want to name our class is. Let's see. Okay, so we can use this. Let's break it into multiple lines so it's easy to read. Okay, so over here we're going to check todo dot is completed. So todo dot is completed. If that is true, then add a strike through class, otherwise don't. Okay, and of course we have to add an event also over here. So we've already pulled out the event, sorry, the method. So we can say, let's break it into multiple lines. We can say on click handle item click. Okay, so what this is going to do is basically, actually we have to pass it inside of a function, because we have to pass index. It won't allow me to otherwise pass a parameter without passing it like this. So this will go ahead and return this function basically is going to return this function, and we'll pass the index along with that. So that'll work. I have already written some CSS for you for the strike through, so just want to show that to you. So we're going to do the text decoration to line through, and color will change the color to this. Okay, and I've already added the styles for all of that, so let's not worry about that. Okay, so let's see what error we get now. Handle item click is not a function. Okay, let's see what's going on. It's not a function. But we did pass it as a function. What's the problem? Let me do a refresh. Sometimes it's just a refresh issue. Oh, okay. It was just an issue with the refresh. That's fine. So you can now see, right? So if you check the state to see what's happening, if I click on this, you can see is completed is true for this one. That is why that class has been added. So if you check the element, if you check, you can see strike through is added. If I click back again, you can see that class is removed, right? Similarly for the other element also, the class is added. If I uncheck, if I click it again, the class is removed. Okay, so if you check the state value, if I click it, you can see it's complete is true. Brilliant. And I can just remove it like that also. I can add a new task also. Awesome. Great. So I hope you did understood, guys. Just to recap the last bit that we just did, basically we went ahead and created the methods. First method was handle remove click. The job of which is to get the index. First it gets the index of whichever item is clicked, and then it's going to get hold of all of the items which are currently there in the state, and it's doing that by using spread operator and putting that inside of an array. And then it's going to go ahead and splice that particular item so that it gets removed from the array. Because it gets removed from the array, state changes and the it gets re-rendered, the component gets re-rendered, and now whatever the new value of to do is, which we have set using set to do method, which is available here, then what that particular array will be displayed. So if there were 4 items in the array, 1 was removed, now the number of items is 3, so 3 will be rendered. Okay, and we are passing this function to our item component, which is right here, and inside of this we are calling this function on an on click and passing the index which is already available to it. Okay, similarly we have created another function which is handle item click, and the job of this is basically to take the index of the element which was clicked, get hold of all the current items in the state, and then go ahead and set the is completed property value of that to whatever to the reverse of whatever the current value is, and then call the set to do function to go ahead and set the new value of the elements. Okay, and again we are passing this function to the item, and it's being consumed over here. This is being called on the click of this particular element. Okay, and then it's giving us the index which is being passed here. All right, so I hope that makes sense. I hope it was not too overwhelming. Yeah, I could have made a simple video as well, but I have already done that in the first introduction. So I have explained to you how you would use the useState hook, which is nothing but a function. Okay, and how you're going to use it when you have a slightly complex situation like this. So how it's going to work between multiple components. So you've got all of that information. Just couple of information about your state hook, which is useState. Okay, so whenever we call this method set to do, okay, React re-renders your component. So as we already know that whenever the state is changed, the component is re-rendered. So the same logic applies here as well. Whenever it goes ahead and changes the state value, the component gets re-rendered and it passes the new state value to it. So this holds the current state then. Okay, initially the to do will be equal to initial state. Whenever you change the value from set to do, then this will be equal to the new state value. Okay, and useState is similar to this.setState in a class, except that it does not merge the old and the new state together. So that's one reason why we are first going ahead and getting all of the value of whatever the current state is using spread operator, and then making the changes to that, and then going ahead and using the set to do function to set the new value of the to do, which is new value of to the state. So it does not merge the old and new state together. Okay, so unlike you would do that in the set state in a class. So that's something you need to remember, and that's why we are doing all of this here. All right, awesome. So I hope guys you did like my video. If you did, please do subscribe to my channel, hit the subscribe button, and do follow me on Twitter. So if you go to Twitter, my Twitter handle is imranhsayed. Okay, so please do follow me here. You can subscribe to my channel for motivation, and you do let me know in case if there are any specific videos that you guys are looking for. Take care. Bye bye.